One week ending with soybeans rally and corn and wheat going down. Ready to comment on that is Jerry Gidel right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date to the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So Jerry, what's behind this soybean rally? I think the major factor here is the lockout in Argentina.
Well, the Argentine situation, they're trying to come up with a new super economic minister down there. Uh, Producers not selling, prices, not very, have been pretty poor. And, the weather down there is not at all good for the wheat. So that helped us. I think the other key question is that the U.S. Weather forecast for the coming week here is a nasty one. Man, they're talking about after last week we were talking about how cool and nice it was going to be this week. Next week we're talking about, uh, generally speaking, west of the Missouri River, temperatures near 100, and areas here east of Missouri up towards Chicago in the mid 90s. In that, so definitely a ugly looking potential situation. Interestingly enough, we still have probably oh, at least 20% possibly of the corn crop that's not been pollinated. And interestingly enough, it's in that area of Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, and that's where some of the heat's going to be kind of the highest ever. And then on the soybean side of things, we've got a few spots out here that haven't had all that much moisture. Kind of comes out of parts of western Illinois on through Iowa, northern plains, Nebraska, Minnesota. And so that's not going to get the soybeans off to a great start. And then all of a sudden, we move through some of these technical situations. We come back over 50%. We go back down above the downtrend line. We hit the 200-day moving average. That's really in 1 week, flipping from gloom and doom of the prices down below 200-day moving average. And a lot of the funds look at how they want to approach a market. If it's below the 200-day average for a price, or if it's above it. And so at this point, we've got the funds that kind of liquidated could be a supporter of soybeans going forward.
Now, do you think that this heat wave in the U.S. Will support both the corn and wheat prices in the coming weeks?
Well, I think the corn is going to have an impact because, as I mentioned, we've had some pollination issues in the northern plains, and also the corn. If it's hot during ear filling and that, interestingly enough, that could take some of the test weight out of. The interesting twist about it on the corn is not so much the fact that the pollination didn't happen; it's the fact that the nighttime temperatures, which is something that always is an interesting one for people to look at because it doesn't really well, if it's 70 or 75 degrees or 80 degrees overnight, what's the big deal? Well, the corn plant's uh, uh, growing cycle is during the day it stresses to get produce sugars and things like that. But if it continues, has to for respiration, it continues to stay hot, and that it doesn't store that energy into the ear and in the seeds. It kind of it's a kind of like a dog panting. It basically uh, gets rid of some of its energy that way, and so it doesn't go into the ear. So I think that's a feature for the corn. Wheat has had a real tough week this week. There's just no doubt about it. From there, with considering that we're in kind of the post-harvest mentality, it kind of went sideways here in the wheat market.
Yes, and next week we are going to check with our own eyes in Illinois how the crops going.
Yes, it's going to be, I think, a very important one to look at this year. Uh, as you point out, uh, another fellow analyst and I in Chicago have kind of done this Central Illinois tour. It's not a wide open tour. We don't go like the Pro Farmer and go from Ohio all the way to through Iowa and Minnesota, or go from South Dakota through Nebraska and Iowa up there. But it is a comparison of really one of the strongest producing areas in the country. It's south and a little southeast, or excuse me, southwest of Chicago. It's kind of varies. The counties around Bloomington, Illinois, and that happens to be the county of McLean, which is one of the bigger producing and strongest yielding counties in the state of Illinois. And that's it will give us at least a snapshot as to how this heat has impacted things, what where we're at on potential crop. This year, particularly, we're a little bit later than normal here on our plantings, and that's so. It'll be interesting as we go through these fields. We'll do one at county, maybe two in McLean, things like that, and trying to get a good feel for what those yields are and make comparisons of what we've been over the years. Last year was actually a little surprising. That's the one that didn't tell us that we really had as strong yields as some people thought. 2 years ago scenario and the year before that were some tough crops out there with excessive rains and things like that. So our comparison this year is going to be coming back to probably 2017 or 18's crops, not the last few years here, to see what kind of yields that important growing area in Illinois has.
And what are you seeing with hearing, I should say, from your contacts about the farmers' sentiment?
Well, the farmers are always an interesting group. There's always people that are real optimistic about their crop being fantastic, and then there's I'd have to say probably half or more that are very cautious about it, and rightly so. This is a time of year when the one thing I think that interestingly enough, a lot of them don't like going into their field and looking at what's there. It just makes them nervous, so they don't really go and make a judgment. Other people want to see how good it is, that kind of stuff, or how bad it is. But I'd say half of them don't really even want to know until the equipment goes into harvest. But that's how it goes at this point. The twist of it is that I don't think people in Indiana or Ohio are very optimistic about their yields. They were very optimistic last year. It kind of tipped off at the end on some of the stuff, but in general, they got in late. It was dry. Now it's maybe too wet. And then you got Iowa. I think there's some optimism there, but there's some streaks in that state that have not had the best of moisture from there. And Nebraska, the heat's been there, and even on some of the irrigation crops are not looking as spiffy as I think people would like to see. And then, of course, the Dakotas, which is a real swing state, they were very tough last year on their yields because of the drought in their area. And so I kind of feel, I think they're wondering because how late they got it in, how good a crop they're going to have. And that's the area that's vulnerable to say we happen to have a cold streak all of a sudden show up in here in the middle of September. That would hurt that crop up there because its maturity is going to really needs to get to the middle of October before anything like that happens in their part of the world.
And before our tour, what are you going to be watching next week?
Well, of course, we're going to be watching the how the weather really comes through here. And that right this weekend, we're probably going to see the wet weather that has been pretty significant. Boy, we had a heck of a rainstorm in the St. Louis, Missouri area across parts of southern Iowa or southern Illinois, and now it's kind of swung down below the Ohio River Valley and hit a lot of Kentucky. They're still talking about some potential rains even across parts of northern Kansas. But then we're going to look at that weather. Of course, the other big factor is going to be how is this Black Sea Food Corridor actually start to function. There's lots of different stories. That's part of the reason why corn and wheat slipped today was the fact that two of the big worldwide commercial insurers, one of them's Lloyd's of London and Marsh and McClendon, both agreed that they were going to be able to put some insurance situations for ships going into Ukraine. That started the scenario. Then there was ideas that maybe one of the not Odessa, but one of the other ports was maybe you can get one or two ships out. And then all of a sudden, the BBC said that there was going to be 10 ships showing up early next week and all this stuff. And that kind of beat up the wheat here late in the day. And after being 20 higher, it was 10 or 15 lower. And it kind of sunk the corn accordingly. But I think that the corn is going to be back looking at the weather situation next week, along with beans. At this point, we're in a situation where as I said, we're above the 20-day moving average in soybeans. We were above it in corn, but then slipped back below it on the new crop. And I kind of feel like that weather is still going to be a highly amplified scenario, and then of course the week after that, then we'll be looking at crop ideas for the USDA's August crop report on the 12th.
All right, I will see you in Illinois next week.
Yes, looking forward to it. Jack Scoville and I will give you a nice detailed idea of how to look for corn yields here in Illinois. Looking forward to seeing you, Elise.
Thank you.
Take care.